Hey guys, how you doing? Here we are, week 13. I've spent some of this week down the road in Perth at my mum and dad's, which has meant my training has been a little bit different this week. I've trained at a couple of different gyms. I've been to a class at a gym, so I've kind of treated this week a little bit differently. I've just kept my routine quite similar, but the exercises that I've been doing within the sessions have been a little bit different. Nutrition has been a little bit more challenging, just being away from home, and obviously we've been out for a couple of meals as well. So I guess this week I've had to adapt a little bit on both fronts, training and nutrition. And this is just life. This is part and parcel of dieting. You're going to have periods where you have to adapt, and it's not going to be perfect. It's not going to be the exact routine that you have been following or want to follow, but it is realistic. It's coincided nicely with me deciding to stop tracking as well. I've actually been tracking intermittently over the last 2 to 3 weeks, so I've not been tracking every single day, just every sort of third day, shall we say. Now, we all know the pros to tracking your calories are that it keeps you pretty accurate. It keeps you on point with your calorie deficit, but there are some negatives to tracking as well, and one of those is that you become a little bit of a slave to it, in that you're always looking at how many calories you've got left in the day, and sometimes this can play with your mind a little bit, affect you in a sort of negative way, and I just wanted to steer away from that a little bit, so I wasn't always thinking about food and always thinking about calories and numbers, and I wanted to try and be a little bit more intuitive with my eating, but still aim for roughly the same amount of calories per day. Now, I know this sounds like it might be very difficult for some people, but I do have a bit of experience with dieting and tracking calories, and obviously I've spent a large part of the last few weeks tracking my calories, so that's really helped me gain a really good understanding of foods, measurements, values, and overall calories to what I'm eating. So I'm probably in a good position to be more intuitive with my eating while I'm dieting. I also think this is quite a good place to be when you're trying to transition out of a diet as well. So I'm going to use this episode to talk about the pros and cons to tracking your calories versus intuitively eating versus following a diet plan. So I'm just going to cover all three of those different approaches and let you know what I think are the benefits to each one and maybe what the downsides are to each one. And hopefully the takeaway for you guys is that you can figure out what approach might be a better approach for you, or maybe a combination of one or two of the approaches might be better for you. You'll find that what I've been following through this journey for me has been a little bit of a combination of all three. Anyway, guys, enjoy the episode and comment below if you found it helpful, and thank you as always for following my journey. If you want to work with myself or anyone in my team, just click the link in the description there to the website, and then you'll find a little bit more about us. You'll find ways to get in touch with us as well.
When you're down and you stare out your window, hoping that you'll come up with some words to say. That's not okay. When you feel like you're fed up with heartbreak, and you know that you can't take another day, well, that's not okay. We can never go back this road, you never go back that way. I see you standing in the corner like it's okay. Don't you know that you move with your body? Don't you know that you move with your body? We can never go back this road, you never go back that way. I see you standing in the corner like it's okay. Don't you know that you move with your body? Don't you know that you move with your body?
So guys, let's look at diet plans. Now, I've followed a diet plan myself, so I can speak from personal experience, and I've also encouraged clients that I've worked with to follow a plan. Now, usually the plans that I've followed have taken into account overall calorie intake, and it has also gave me an insight into the amount of protein that I should be consuming. Generally, diet plans will be focused around unprocessed foods, using recipes, using natural products, cooking from scratch, and it will probably include lots of fruits, vegetables, that sort of thing. So it can really help get you to build better habits. So it might be helpful in the initial stages of a diet just to help get you into a better way of eating and encourage you to maybe cook more meals and include better sources of foods within your diet. And because it's encouraging you to make your own recipes, it's also encouraging you to prepare foods, cook foods, and get in the kitchen. It also teaches you a little bit about calories and macronutrients and, you know, meals that include protein, carbohydrates, and fat. So it might boost your knowledge. If you're following recipes, you'll quickly find out what is a serving for 2 or a serving for 1 or a serving for 4. So it might help with people that are maybe eating too much at their meal times portion wise. Also gives you a base structure to follow. Bit like a training program. Sometimes if you go into the gym and you don't have a plan, you're a bit all over the place, you're not quite sure what you're doing, you're jumping from this exercise to that exercise with no real direction. And a diet plan can sometimes give you that direction, give you that information, take that stress away, which can then build confidence and empowerment in what you're doing and allow you to basically start the process of building better habits and eating healthier. So the downsides to a diet plan are that it can be very difficult to follow for any real length of time. So it's not really a sustainable approach. And this is difficult because it's quite rigid. You're following a set structure with no real flexibility to it. I also feel that it can contribute towards developing a negative relationship with food and dieting in general, in that you only associate losing weight or being successful with a diet while following a plan. And when you're off a plan, you're not really sure what you're doing, and you associate that period with sort of gaining weight and not having control. There's also no real flexibility there, so that if you are deciding to eat out or you haven't managed to cook the meals that are on the plan, what do you do? These are sort of real life things that are going to happen. You're going to go and visit your family, you're going to go on holiday, you're going to go away from the weekend, you're going to go out for a meal. So there's going to be loads of occasions where you've probably found it difficult to stick to this plan. That's why I always think a diet plan is more or less just a guide to encourage you to eat healthier, cook more home-cooked meals, and give you a rough description of what a day might look like if you were to do that. But you should always bear in mind that life is not like that, and you need to educate yourself beyond this diet plan and understand that there'll be large periods of times where you won't necessarily be able to follow it exactly.
Another way to begin the story would be to start from the end. There's nothing left of the dream I pursued.
So guys, the pros to tracking your calories or your macros. It gives you more flexibility. So you're not a slave to an actual set of meals on a bit of paper. You have that flexibility to cook meals when you're able to, eat out if you want to eat out, choose things from the shop, go to your friends. You have a bit more flexibility with what you're doing, so it is more realistic to what life is like. But the main pro for me is it gives you a much more accurate approach to counting calories. So if you're counting your calories, you're tracking your macros, you're probably using an app as well. So it can be quite easy for us to do this nowadays. So MyFitnessPal is the main one that comes to mind. So you've probably worked out how many calories you should be consuming to maintain your weight and therefore to lose weight and get into a calorie deficit. So it's already starting to educate us a little bit more about losing weight and having to be in a calorie deficit. And hopefully by doing this, you're getting an understanding that you can include all food groups while tracking and while losing weight. So the main benefits for me are that flexibility, accuracy, and it falls more in line with what life is like. One of the cons is that it can be quite stressful and time consuming, having to track every single item of food that you consume on a daily basis, and it can lead to a little bit of an excessive behavior as well. So I think it is a fantastic tool for allowing you to be accurate with your diet and giving you flexibility, but because it can lead to obsessive behaviors, or it can become a stressful situation, I feel like it is something that we don't need to do all the time. We need to do it for a period of time and then maybe introduce it on an intermittent basis like I have done, so that you can start to progress towards maybe intuitively eating. Something I've noticed as well is that food quality sometimes can be neglected. There's this attitude that if it fits your macros, it's okay to eat. So I would always encourage my clients to go through the stages of building better habits, introducing better quality food into their diet first: fruit and vegetables, water, focusing on their sleep, focusing on their steps, focusing on their daily activity, building better lifestyle habits, looking at their diet and understanding where they can improve the most, and just generally just getting them to cook more, be in the kitchen a little bit more, preparing foods, building that organization so that they can use a method such as tracking and get the most out of it. Because I think if you jump into that stage right from the get-go, you're probably going to fail. And the main downside for me, and I can relate this to maybe how I felt over the last few weeks, is you're always thinking about your next meal. I don't know what it is, but when I'm tracking all my intake, my focus is always on the next meal and how many calories I've got left. But when I take that away, personally for me, I seem to not have this focus around what I'm having to eat next or how many calories I've got left in the day. I don't know if it's because if you track over a certain period, like anything, like following a diet plan over a certain period, these things start to creep in, so that maybe tracking for shorter periods of time is better, or doing what I did over the last couple of weeks is doing it intermittently, so you get the benefits of being accurate, you get the flexibility, but you also teach yourself how to eat more intuitively as well.
I don't care if you don't wanna do all the things that I do, that I do. I only wanna be the one who makes you feel so good, so good. I'm trying to figure out where all of the pieces are going to fit, but I stumble in the dark when I am not with you.
the pros to intuitive or instinctive eating are, for me, it's less time consuming, it's less stressful, it is more flexible than other methods as well. You eat when you want to eat, you listen to your body more, you eat when you're hungry rather than eating because it's a certain time of the day. And I think because you are maybe not tracking or following a certain structure or plan, you're probably more likely to choose healthier options, or that's what I feel like doing personally myself, is that you're not 100% sure how many calories you're intaking, so that you're maybe going to counteract that against choosing better quality foods and making better choices throughout the day. The real downside with this is that you don't have control over your overall calorie intake. You're not really sure where you're at with that. You may also be undershooting protein. And for someone like myself who's training and in a diet, I don't really want to be consuming less protein than what I was previously or what I need. So I have to take that into account, that with this approach, you don't have the same level of control. I don't think this is probably the best approach for a beginner. I think they probably need a little bit more structure. They maybe need a little bit of a plan as a guide, like we've said before, and then progress towards tracking in some way in order to build up that knowledge, that understanding, but get that accountability and get that control alongside their diet. But this is, for me, a much better place to be towards the tail end of this diet, and as I transition into maybe trying to maintain my weight, where I'm not so focused around tracking this, tracking that, following this, following that. I'm being a little bit more intuitive, I'm being a little bit more instinctive, and I'm listening to my body a little bit more. And I'm happy to do that because I feel like I have actually spent time building up better habits, and I've got myself into a position where I understand how many calories are in this meal, how many calories are in that meal. I've got a better understanding of how much protein is in a chicken breast, how much protein is in this meal I'm having here, etc., etc. So there's pros and cons to absolutely everything. There is no perfect dieting approach. In my mind, it makes sense to sort of layer it in that your bottom layer is you start by building better habits, then you progress on to maybe learning a bit more about calories and introducing tracking as a method to help you gain control and accountability, and then going a little bit further into maybe trying to eat a little bit more instinctively without having to have these measures that are sort of maybe got a little bit of control over you. Ultimately, I want personally, and for you guys, is to have a good relationship with food. I want it to be flexible, sustainable. I want you to be able to achieve results long term and not just in the short term. And I think with a lot of dieting approaches and methods, and the ones that we've discussed here, you can get a lot of gain in the short term, but ultimately for it to work in the long term, we've always got to be continually developing our knowledge, making mistakes so that we can learn from them, and understanding what works best for us personally, because what works best for me might not work for you. And you might follow this video and think, nah, I don't really agree with what Barry's saying there. I've got a better way of doing it, and that's totally fine. I may disagree with myself when I look back at these videos in a couple of years' time, but this is just where I'm at and where my knowledge is at, and hopefully you have got some value out of that.
One look and I breathe. One touch feels skin deep. A picture perfect, underserving.
2, 1, go.